Damon, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. You're the CEO of Learnit. You've done a lot in terms of, education and upskilling almost 1.8 million people. You've written this book all about, how to learn. And you also have this amazing Learn It All podcast. So I think this episode is going to be all about learning and how we can all learn. So welcome to the show again.
Well, thanks for having me, and it's great to be here.
So to start off, can you give a little bit of context in terms of your journey on how you, came to work on LearnIt?
Sure. So my name's Damon Lembi. I was born and raised in San Francisco, California. I grew up, and as a kid, for me, it was all about sports. When it was baseball season, I played baseball. When I played football, and so that was it through high school. I always wanted to play professional sports, and I realized by the time I was a sophomore in high school that baseball was really my best opportunity. So I put a lot of effort into that. I turned out being a high school All-American, and I was drafted by the Atlanta Braves out of high school. And I had this opportunity: do I go play professionally, or do I go take a full ride to Pepperdine University? I ended up going the college route and got hurt at Pepperdine, left, got another opportunity to go to play at Arizona State, one of the best schools in the country. And I thought that after having a couple good years there, I was going to be able to continue my journey into professional baseball. Sometimes things don't turn out the way you want it to. And I wasn't drafted again. And here I was, 22 years old, thinking to myself, well, I identified as a baseball player my whole life. This dream's over with. What do I do now? And are my skills even transferable? What can I do that I've learned playing baseball in the business world? I was really fortunate. I come from a family with a lot of businesses, from real estates to restaurants to even a hotel chain. And this was back in 1995. My father, Walt, was starting a computer training company. He went and took a class somewhere. He thought it was boring and slow. So he came up with ideas to have small bite-sized classes. That's where Learn It came up. I started there as a receptionist, and I kind of worked my way up over the years, and from teaching classes to doing sales. And we've but we've transitioned from being just a computer training company to being an overall corporate training company. And we help customers when they're looking to upskill new managers, roll out new programs, onboard employees. And that's really what we've done. And like you mentioned, been fortunate enough to train over 1.9 million individuals over our career at Learnit. And what's really made me the most excited is the team we've been able to develop. And we've had a great team. And I share all of these in the book you're referring to, the Learn It All Leader, which kind of talks about, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but what a Learn It All is versus a Know It All, and how that could positively impact not only your organization, but your leadership style.
So talk to me a little bit about, how sort of training and upskilling changed from when you first started in 95 to now, and sort of how the business evolved, and what is the size of the business today and all that.
Great. That's actually a great question. Back in 1995, everything was typically in person. This is kind of pre-internet, and everything was in person. And you'd have your physical printed out books, and you'd sit in there. And sometimes these classes would be 2 to 3 days long. And think about that: sitting in a 3-day class to learn how to use Excel, and that's what how we kind of disrupted the market back in the day. One of the things that my father always said is, you got to have a unique value proposition and do something a little different, or else you're just vanilla and get lost. And so we came in, and the way we taught back then was everything was in 90-minute bite-sized segments. And that helped with retention, flexibility and scheduling, and also like really honing in on what you wanted to learn. say for instance, if you just want to learn pivot tables, you don't have to sit there for 2 days to figure it out. And as you see with a lot of startups that actually make it, a lot of people thought we were nuts. They're like, there's no way this is going to work. This is how we always do it. But we tried something a little different, and that's really, if you look at how the training world is now, everything is short, modular, bite-sized gamification, on demand. So it's a complete shift. The corporate training world is about $160 billion a year industry, which is, I think back then was closer to probably 20 or 30. So it's dramatically changed, improved, and it's one of the things that, especially the younger generations, people are demanding the opportunity to learn and grow in their position. And because a lot of times they're not looking at it as, okay, this is a job I'm going to work at forever. I want to pick up the skills I need to be able to continue on in my growth.
So I think running a company of this scale would have a great vantage point in terms of like, what are people actually trying to learn and what are companies want their employees to learn.
Mhm.
So talk to me a little bit about, what are the trends that you're seeing about, what people actually want to learn.
Yeah, it's definitely changed over time. And I think one of the great things about Learn It for me personally is I've been able to evolve our company. We're small. We have about 75 employees, but I've been able to see behind the curtain really of what some of the largest organizations in the world think about and when it comes to people development and to leadership. So what most of the organizations look for and need these days, as far as what Learn Its core is really, is a lot around new manager skills. A lot of individuals are getting promoted into leadership roles for the first time, and as you're aware, it's a totally different skill set. That's a different, as an individual contributor, whether you're somebody on the accounting team or in sales, transitioning into a leadership role is a big is a big jump, is a big change. So there's a lot around focusing in on leadership skills. Now, obviously, with COVID, there's a big shift to everybody going to work remote. So how do organizations, how do they use the tools at the time, whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Asana? How are they using these tools successfully, or more successfully? And how would they learn to be able to trust their employees and keep them accountable without having them physically in different locations? And for a lot of our customers, some of the largest companies that we work with, that was a big challenge. It was a big shift in mind shift. And then when the world went back to, let's say, a hybrid approach, that was another big shift because now you tell everybody, okay, you're going to work remotely forever because we don't know if everything's going to come back to what it was. And now the cat's kind of out of the bag. So it's a big challenge getting people to come back into the office. Outside of learning and development, I also have invested in a lot of real estate over the years in commercial real estate, and so kind of that's been a challenge for all of us out there is getting the employees to want to come back into the office even for a couple of days of the week and seeing the value with that. So what we try to work with our organizations around our customers is showing value for their employees to come back into the office so that when you are back in the office, there's actually a purpose. So it's not like everybody's back in the office 4 days a week and they're just on remote calls all the time. How can you get people back into the office with purpose, collaboration, and so that is top of mind these days, as well, of course, what everybody wants to talk about, and I'm a big fan of, and I know you are as well with your 100 days of AI growth, is AI. And how is AI not only going to impact learning and development, which it is, but the overall workforce? What's going to happen with the employees? What are the skills they're going to need? And it's a major shift in how the world's moving.
I think since you brought up AI, one of the challenges I think product managers or managers in general, and everyone is excited about the technology, but people don't know how to sort of get the buy-in from leadership,
Hmm.
right? So have you seen any trends or like ways to sort of, and as an educator or people helping do this stuff, right? How do you get that buy-in? How do you sort of convince that your team or your leadership that, hey, we have to go do this? And because there's also, whenever there is hype, people sort of tend to say, let's take a step back, let's see if this thing sustains the hype that it has, and then we'll do something. So how are you looking at in terms of just how someone working at a company can push people around them to sort of focus on this on AI initiatives.
I think it's a great question. And, there's a couple ways to do it. I personally think if it comes top down, let's say the senior leaders in the organization are like me and they're all gung ho about AI. And then you try to push it down on your team, there's still a lot of, people are worried. Is this going to take my job? Is it secure? Is it going to steal all my information? So it's really like a lot of change management initiatives. There needs to be a lot of communication and being clear with what the goals are. What I've kind of found and what I've tried to do, both internally for our organization and I've seen others, is have it come from the ground up, have it come from the individual contributors within the organization, give them the opportunity to use ChatGPT, use Superhuman, use all these tools out there available, invest in them to have it and give them the time and space to use them and to leverage them. And then give them the opportunity to share with their team some of the successes they've had and how they've leveraged these tools, whether to be more efficient or to have better at research, whatever it is. So try to build up the excitement throughout the organization. A lot of times at the individual contributor level can have a ripple effect that will lead to a positive outcome for organizations. And I think all this kind of comes back to what we were mentioning earlier is having, whether you want to call it a growth mindset or a learn it all attitude, it's having, not having the attitude of the know it all, like this is how we do it, this is how it's going to be. Well, what I like to tell people is you're not going to lose your I don't think you're going to lose your job solely to AI. I think you're going to lose your job to individuals who learn how to leverage AI, who are power users, or at least have the learning agility, which, by the way, I think is one of the top skills, or maybe just the top skill out there today, and that they have the aptitude and ability to go out and learn these tools to grow in their careers.
So I mean, you brought up learn it all, which is such a um, great phrase. I work at Microsoft, and one of the big tenets in Microsoft is growth mindset, and the way Satya defines it is learn it all versus know it all.
Yeah.
And when you closely look at that, just that 6 words, you can sort of encompass all about growth investing. Talk to me a little bit about what makes someone learn it all versus know it all, and how do how does that look on a practical sense? When you're doing your day to day job.
So let's start with a know-it-all. We kind of talked about this a little bit. A know-it-all is somebody who comes into the conversation or comes and they have it all figured out. They're always right. They're not open to listening to what anybody else has to say. And it's my way or the highway. This is how we do it. This is how we always done it. Now, on the flip side, you have a learn it all. And to me, a learn it all, and yes, it's big at Microsoft, the growth mindset and everything. But to me, a learn it all is somebody who comes in and says, I don't know everything, and I'm going to keep an open mind, a flexible mind, and be willing to learn from others, not being afraid to be vulnerable, saying, "Hey, you know what? I don't have this all figured out." Getting diverse opinions, learning what other people have to say, I think a lot of it is being curious and interested, and learning to adapt. For me, I call it learn it all leader. my definition of a leader, you don't have to lead a 50-person team, a 100-person team, or be a small business owner. I think we're all leaders. It all starts with self leadership. And with that, you can have the skills and the ability to want to always continuously grow, continuously learn, and continuously grow. And the key traits that I really look at is humility, uh, to have curiosity, to always be curious, like we mentioned, integrity. I think it's always important, you want to do the right thing, and then also courage. Now, I'm not saying the kind of courage that risk taking, I mean, maybe bold decisions when it comes to work, but what I'm saying courage is step out of your comfort zone. Don't be a try, don't be afraid to try something and fail. Learn from your failure. Those are all to me the qualities or the traits that are necessary to be a learn it all and to continue to evolve and grow in your career, personally and professionally.
Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, I often sort of think about when I do things, because I do a couple of things outside work,
Mhm.
is sort of the imposter syndrome. Like I was judging an event the other day, and I felt like whether I should be judging other folks, right? It's sort of like a classic imposter syndrome. But then after the event, I felt like because I saw so many deals, I invested. Then okay, I rationalized in my mind, okay, I definitely did more deals than some of the other folks there. So I sort of rationalized that, okay, maybe I don't have to worry about imposter syndrome. But, it's sort of like a constant struggle I see with a lot of people. And it also sort of, I would say, slows down people's careers, because people always think that I'm not enough, or, I'm not yet there to sort of take a plunge and take the next step, either career wise or something that you want to pursue, to making that ideal career or ideal profile for yourself. How do you, and I know like you wrote a lot about imposter syndrome and how to overcome that. So how does one overcome imposter syndrome?
So first of all, I would say everybody struggles with imposter syndrome at some point in their life. If if they don't, if they tell you they don't, they're either lying or a sociopath. So, for those of us, for your listeners out there who have struggled with imposter syndrome, self doubt, didn't think they believed, you're not alone. It happens. It happens to all of us. My real first experience with imposter syndrome was going back all the way back to when I when I went from being a high school All-American in baseball to college. So you're used to being like the best player around, nobody even close. Then you get into college and everybody is as good as you or better. And, for the first time in my life, I thought to myself, I mean, do I even belong here? Am I good enough to be here? And unfortunately, at the time, as a 17-year-old kid, I didn't really have the tools or the mindset to make it work, and that's kind of why I failed at originally at Pepperdine, and it took me by the time I got to Arizona State to learn how to deal with imposter syndrome, and really. I built a formula. I use a formula that, or a framework, so to speak, on how to overcome it. And the first thing is you got to identify what you're upset about or what you're worried about. And it could be, I'm just promoted into a new role as a manager. I don't know why they promoted me. I don't think I'm good enough to even get the job done. Or I really want to go in on this investment, but what if what if I give my advice and it doesn't work out and people lose their money or my group, whatever it is so first identify, label what you're worried about. Then the second thing is a coin that I termed called purposeful awfulizing. And so what I mean by purposeful awfulizing is, let's use the example of being promoted into becoming a manager. And then you think to yourself, okay, if I take this job and I completely fall flat on my face, in a year from now, what's the absolute worst thing that's going to happen? And let's say that maybe that I lost my job. Maybe that's the absolute worst thing that can happen. Well, I can go out and get another job. It might be tough, but I can overcome the worst case scenario. So if you've realized that you could overcome the worst case scenario, then go for it. And that moves into my little framework that I have. So it's a three-step framework. Number one is work hard. I'm not saying put in 10 to 15 hours a day, but I'm saying put in hard work and just there's no shortcut for hard work. There's no hack for it. You have to put in the hard work. You got to roll up your sleeves and do the work. Number two is focus on what your challenge is. Deliberate focus. It's really easy when something is tough for you to lose it, to lose sight of it. It's let's say you're working on a big project at work and you're stressed out over it. It's really easy to get distracted and go do something else, even busy work to get it done. But no, you have to work hard and you have to be really focused and put in the deliberate practice. And then the third step is learn and let go. So what I mean by that, let's say you're worried about giving a presentation. You're not a great public speaker, but you've accepted an opportunity to do a speaking gig. Well, if you've worked hard, if you've put in the practice and you've really focused, when it's game time, it's game time. You leave all your techniques. Not, I mean, stop thinking about what your techniques. Stop thinking about what you're going to do. Go in there and give it your best shot. Do the best you can do, and it might work. You might work out great. It might be terrible, but at the end of the day, I think people don't give themselves enough credit. Give yourself a pat on the back for even trying. And through every opportunity, successful or failure, you could learn from that. A lot of times you can learn from failure even more, but pat yourself on the back for sticking your neck out there and trying it, because a lot of people won't even try. They'll just, like you said, they'll say, well, I'm not good enough. What if I don't do well? Well, here's a little news flash as well. You don't do well in a presentation, well, maybe you lose a deal, or maybe you're giving a talk somewhere and people laugh or they're embarrassed. People have their own lives. They'll think about that honestly for about 5-10 minutes and then they'll move on. You're not necessarily all the time as important as you think you are. So get out of your own head, put in the work, put in the practice, and learn and let go. Learn from what you're upset about or you're worried about, and just give it your absolute best. And to me, that's really also an epitome of a learn it all too. It's having the courage to step out of your comfort zone and try something and learn from it.
Yeah. So one of the uh, ways I sort of block my imposter syndrome is there's this great quote. I forgot who said it, but everything great that you see around you is created by a normal person like you.
Hmm.
I'm paraphrasing it, but that's sort of like the essence of it. So I always use that in my mind. That sort of like you can go and do things. The worst thing is you'll fail,
Yeah,
and that sort of quote is basically also motivates that everything, like you will not become great if you not sort of go and do it, right? You have to do it, take your chances. There's no other like way other than just going and doing it.
I
Yeah.
agree with you. I mean, I think all of us have to learn how to get comfortable with failure and get comfortable with learning to hear the word no and to deal with failure. And I think it's great what you said. I mean, for you and your investing and in the work you do, I'm sure not everything goes great all the time, right? So you have to, how do you overcome it?
I mean, the only way I always look at it is, okay, what is the worst thing that you already said about? Like, what is the worst thing that could happen?
Hmm.
And let's say you got into podcasting. What's the worst thing that could happen? Like, no one listens, or you might, get nervous and during the recording, but you always have the choice to not publish it. So
Hmm.
there's no fear of anything really. It's sort of like, I think most of the fears they're bigger in our mind than in reality, right? So I think, you fail. And the only thing I would say is, in all the bets that you take, never risk ruin. So, for example, if you know that there's a risk on any investment, don't invest everything into it. That's the only thing I sort of tell people. Like, you can take any number of bets as long as they're not ruining you completely. So I think that is sort of like the balance we need to strike. So I don't want to do a public speaking gig so outrageous that it will destroy my life. So
Right.
that is a risk that you're taking, right?
Yeah.
So that's not a risk worth taking. There are so that's how I sort of reframe risk. And then most risks are actually not risks.
Yeah.
Like even I tell people who start companies as a risk taking thing, they really didn't look at it, because there's investment dollars available. You have people ready to work with you. If everything fails, you can come back and do the job that you're doing. So what is the real risk here?
Mhm.
You're still getting paid while you're doing that company. So these are most of the times, I think, the true risk we sort of over exaggerate in our mind itself. So that's how I rationalize it, in my mind.
I think you bring up a really good point. And what I didn't add to the whole purposeful awfulizing, which is basically the same thing you're saying, but in another way, is that if you look at it and the worst case scenario is you lose your house and you go bankrupt, well then don't do it. you
Yeah.
know, don't do it. Only do the size of the bet that you could afford to lose. So think that through. And sometimes people aren't rational; they get all excited and they're like, "Oh, this is a sure win," or I'm super passionate about starting this company, and I put my all eggs in one basket. I think you really have to take a step back and think through what the scenario could end up to be.
Yeah, and there are founders who do that, like they put whole life savings into it. Then you're doing the wrong bet. You're taking the right bet in a wrong way. There are right ways to take the same bet, is what I would say. But you also talked about this concept called trust tax. Tell me a little bit about that more.
Sure. Trust tax. What I mean by the trust tax is, let's say we all go into relationships, and whether it's at work as a manager to an individual, to your direct reports, or just personal relationships, and nobody has a perfect record. You're going to get burned at one time or another. But there's really two ways to go about it. As a manager, let's just use a business perspective. As a manager, you have really two choices. You could trust your employees. You could, that you've given them the skills, and then you put them off on an assignment or whatever their tasks or responsibilities are, that they can get it done. Or you can be skeptical and you could be looking over their shoulder all the time, right? You could do one or two of those ways. In a professional relationship, you can trust that whoever you're working with or whoever you're friend with has the best intentions, or you could always slide into every relationship thinking this person's gonna screw me over. I, the trust tax, I believe, is you're better off going into relationships giving people the benefit of the doubt, believing that people have the best intentions. I mean, you got to be smart about it, but giving people the best intentions, and 90% of the time, or if you live in California, 60% of the time, it's going to work out. And the other, but I'm making a joke, but you got to pay the tax. So the tax is the time it doesn't work out. I'll give you an example. This is going back about 8 or 9 years ago. Uh, One of our senior level leaders, um, on the product development side, curriculum side, asked to go to a conference, and said sure, send him off to the conference. It was a full week. It probably cost about 8 to 10 grand. Great, great investment. As a company that does training for people, we want to invest in our own people. The gentleman came back. He stayed, waited till he collected his annual bonus about 2 months later, then quit and took a job for the people who ran the conference. And that's, to me, that's not a lot of integrity, and it's it didn't turn out the way you wanted to. But that's not going to prevent me from sending people to conferences again. That's not going to prevent me from giving somebody else a chance. I'm going to believe that people have the best the best intentions, and at the end of the day, it's going to happen every once in a while where they won't. But overall, I think people will surprise you and people will do a great job. And that's just the way I think there's too much, it takes too much effort to put negative energy into something. And be smart, come in relationship with open eyes, but give people the opportunity to prove you right.
I think there's another sort of trend that we are seeing is this idea of your company is not your family. And I think more and more, especially in the remote first world, or recently what we have seen, even in like, how we've seen a lot of layoffs in, some of the biggest companies as well. And we often see that, I think during non-recession or non-layoff period, we often use this phrase that, my team is my family and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So talk to me a little bit about, your philosophy of how do you look, or how should employers, look at their teams, or the company that they're working for.
And I think this is important for your listeners out there who are running a startup or maybe a small business, or you know, or on the flip side, if you're an employee at a company, uh, and you feel really loyal to them. I have a lot of friends that I've made through my relationships working at Learn It, and who are alumni. And but the reason why I believe that you should treat your company as a team instead of a family is, for sports terms, as a leader, it's your responsibility to put an elite team on the field at all times. Okay, at all times. So if you're a startup, Series A company, and you're just getting off the ground, you might have somebody who's great at the at a director of operations role, who can manage your team at 10 to 50 employees, up to, let's say, $5 million in revenue, and then things take off. That same person may not be the person who's going to get you to 50, $100 million in revenue, who could run these larger teams. And at that point, it's tough. But as a leader, as a founder, you have to make bold, tough decisions, and you have to always constantly put your team, the most elite team out there, that's going to be able to help you scale and get you to go where you need to go. Now, I'm not saying just walk in one day and fire this person. Work with them and give them a heads up. Like, if there's another role in the company where they can crush it, great. Otherwise, I've had plenty of conversations with individuals who've been learning a long time, who have hit their capacity, and sometimes it's just like, hey, you know what? This is just like, you're doing this on auto these days. You need to go out there and stretch and go do something different. So we're buddies outside of work. I appreciate all your loyalty, but you've reached your capacity here, and you need new challenges yourself. So whether it's from the organizational level, the leadership level, or for your listeners out there who are individual contributors, or leaders that don't feel like that you have to stick with where you're at all the time. You need to continuously learn how to grow and evolve in your career. I'm not saying take a job and leave it 2 months later, but don't stick around for years at a company because you think it's like you owe it to them.
So you did, well, as someone who's running a company, and this is a podcast where we, talk a lot about investing.
Hmm?
So I wanted to ask, like, what is your sort of investing philosophy, and how do you like split your investing between, different asset classes?
Yeah. So my investment philosophy is to, first of all, well, for real estate, it's trying to look at the comps in the areas and try to forecast what things are going to be like in the future, which obviously is really rough right now, especially on the commercial side. Now, on the non-real estate, if we're as far as investing in startups and whatnot, is try to understand more about the leadership team. Who's on the leadership team? What is their past success? What are they going to be able to execute on, what the product is that they're launching, and where does it fit into the market? I mean, right now there's so much out there around AI, again, that we're talking about AI and crypto, which I don't know much about. My investing I also really want to get in and learn and talk to other individuals to see what their thoughts are on what it will be. And a lot of times I'll just put in a little bit, invest a little bit without going all in all the time. But I think it's important to understand the team behind, especially at, at seed level or small organizations, the team and what their makeup is, as well as, you know, really having an understanding of where this product can kind of fits in the market and what the competitors are around it.
So, are you investing in early stage companies or late stage, or more like traditional businesses, or what types of what does the spread look like?
I would say the spread for me is about 50% seed companies
Hmm.
and 50% more traditional companies.
Got it. And
So not very risky. Some of them aren't that risky, but I like to invest in uh, uh, startups who've got a good idea getting in kind of at the ground floor.
any interesting companies that you invested recently, or
IntelliRent,
Intelligent?
IntelliRent, which is a software that is out there that's going to help streamline the process for applications, for tenant applications.
Got it. And how does the split between like public and private look like? Do you invest in public markets or um,
Uh, a little bit in the public markets, um, mostly in the private, in the private one. I would say 80% private, and then yeah, like I said, as far as the on the real estate side, when for investing, a group of individuals that we work together and go in mostly on the multi-tenant side, but you know either fortunately or unfortunately, what you want to say right now is on the commercial side as well in San Francisco.
you also mentioned restaurants, right? Are you still investing or running restaurants?
I think that's probably, I'd recommend staying away from that. There's, we've had a couple of restaurants. I've got friends who have restaurants, and especially these days with minimum wage increasing, the cost of insurance, it's spoils. It's a very, very hard business. Um, yeah, it's very tough. So, I mean, if you have money to burn, and a lot of my friends do it for vanity reasons, so that they can get free meals, they can bring their clients there, they could say that they're part of X restaurant in San Francisco, stuff like that. But I I wouldn't make a career of investing
It's very
in those
similar
things.
to producing movies.
To what?
It's very similar to producing movies.
Oh, 100%. You're right, right? Everybody, hey, I'm a producer in, the next Iron Man or something. Yeah, that's very similar.
So we're almost at the end of our conversation. One final question I want to ask is, I see a stack full of books behind you. So, what are the some of the interesting books that you're reading right now, or what are your some of all-time favorite books?
So, great question. I would say some of the books that I'm reading right now is I'm reading the it's a book about CEOs. I can tell you, you can put it in the show notes. That's written by a handful of McKinsey employees.
Hmm.
It's very fascinating. One of my favorite books of all time is a book named Range by David Epstein, and it's really about being a generalist over a specialist.
Hmm.
And again, it kind of goes into the whole growth mindset of going out and trying things. I love reading books. Uh, I love reading biographies. One piece of advice I always give to the individuals I'm mentoring, especially who are startup founders, is go out and read 25, 50 biographies from all types of leaders. I mean, for 10, $25, you could learn the successes and failures that they had. And I love reading books on like Winston Churchill. Um, my favorite sales book as of late is a book called The Jolt Effect by Matt Dixon, who also wrote the Challenger Sales. And what I love about Jolt Effect is they took tens of thousands of minutes of Zoom minutes recordings, and they analyzed the win and loss rates and what really caused that. And one thing I didn't realize was 55% of all deals lost are for no decision. So it's not that you lost to a competitor, it's that you just weren't compelling enough to move forward with. So the book talks about a lot of, how to get ahead of objections, how to show value, and how to avoid losing to no decision. Those are. Let me ask you this: what's your favorite book, either of all time or right now?
Right now, I'm reading this book called Super Intelligence. Uh, yeah, I think it's Super Intelligent. It's written by, I think, two professors. I forgot from which college, but it sort of summarizes all the mental models that are out there. So it's a great book for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So they take mental models that Charlie Munger wrote. They take mental models from different books, but they also put it in a framework where, there are a lot of mental models that are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So they sort of like go to the origin stories of how that mental model is called that specific mental model. So, for example, Occam's law is a very famous mental model people use, which says that any obvious explanation is the right thing, and they give the examples of when to use that model and how to use that model. So it's a very practical book for decision making and just living life. I don't know why it's not more popular, but I'm reading it very slowly because there's so much, so much dense information in every page.
That's awesome. Have you ever read? Do you follow Fathom Street?
Farnham Street, yeah,
Farnham Street, Farnham Street. Sorry, I butchered that. But no, Shane and those guys. I think that they're pretty solid when it comes to the mental models as well.
yeah. Shane is, I think he also has a podcast, which is
Hmm.
also amazing, and yeah, overall the newsletter is also amazing.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
also trying to read as much as I can or learn as much as I can about AI and really how it can positively impact or the what it's going to do in the future. So yeah,
you're being the classic learn it all.
I'm trying to be the classic learn it all.
I think that's a good note to end the conversation with, Damon. Thanks for coming on the show, sharing all about all the amazing insights that you've learned from your experience of running the company, and it's been a pleasure.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Enjoy the conversation.